attention. My name's Dave Monte. I'm Vice Chair of the Council, but I will be chairing the meeting today in Bob Blue's absence. And they're going to pretty much run the meeting as Bob has run them in the past. I think it's worthy to note two things, that I will not vote except there's a tie. We had a discussion that we felt that it would be important to move a recommendation on to the director, so that in case of a tie, I will be voting tonight, but other than that, I will not vote. And secondly, as practice, and we started doing this about a year ago, we will not necessarily be going to the audience for comments unless a council person so chooses to do that. All the council has been briefed. In fact, I sent them a reminder note to make sure they read all the comments, and everyone has received all the comments from the public hearing in the last two letters. So that will be the normal practice, and we'll see how that goes. So that said, I have one, I'd like to review and approve the agenda tonight, but I do have one change. And this is in item 8. We have a series, and that's the big item. That's November 12th public hearing items. And if you go about halfway down, you'll see proposed adoption of a whelk pot tagging program. We'd like to move that to the end. And the end is really not the end. The end is after pot 13, if you would. So there are 3 informational bullets. Proposed adoption of the whelk pot tagging program will be moved after pot 13. So I'll entertain, do I have approval of the agenda from the council by consent? So the agenda is approved as revised. We have the minutes from our last meeting. And are there any comments on that meeting? Any comments from the council? Andy, you good with that? Okay, so the minutes are approved by consent. Item number 3 on the agenda is public comment. And again, this is an opportunity for folks in the audience to bring up items that aren't on the agenda that perhaps we can discuss, not necessarily tonight, but it's some other time. So I'd like to go to the public and ask, are there any comments? Yes.
Yeah, so there's a CRMC meeting December 10th addressing a commercial viability aquaculture application by Boyd and Allen. And to the best of my understanding, it didn't come in front of this council because it's a viability application and not a full-scale aquaculture application. But I am just looking for support from the Marine Fisheries Council because this proposed Car Point location has massive conflicts with commercial fisheries in the bay. I keep my boat at New England Boat Works, which is about a half-mile north of the proposed site. So I drive by it every morning and afternoon, over 200 days a year. So I have a pretty good idea of what goes on there. In addition to extensive cohogging activity year-round, there's also whelk and fish potting in the area. Many fixed-gear fishermen from ports in Bristol, Portsmouth, Newport, and others regularly conch pot in the area in the spring and the fall. Also, there's wild blue mussel beds on Car Point. These attract large aggregations of scup and sea bass that myself and other fishermen target with fish pots in the summer. When I set a trawl at Car Point, I'm typically sitting right next to a guy cohogging, so I'm already working around him. We're working around each other. There's multiple gear uses in the area. Putting another aquaculture lease, even if it is a small little sliver, just tightens the ground even more. And the shallow waters around Dyer Island are a haven for fixed gear fishermen in the bay. It's one of the few areas where mobile gear is not allowed. So there's a lot of fixed gear fishing activity in addition to cohogging right in this application area. I kind of consider it sort of a slap in the face. It's pretty much one of the worst.
And what is the status of the application? You said there was no need to go before the
so
council.
Katie actually explained to me a little. I'm not sure why it didn't come in front of council. It didn't go through the Shellfish Advisory Panel either. I guess because it's a commercial viability application, it's for a really small size.
Yep.
I guess to see if it would work in that area. But I just think it's about as bad of a location as you can get in terms of conflict with wild harvest fisheries. So,
right, Jason, are you familiar with those?
Yes, so if I could, Mr. Chair, I'll go to maybe Julia to speak to the process aspect of this.
So the CD usually doesn't have to go through the same permitting process that the larger applications do. It's exactly what you explained. It's basically a preliminary site to test out how it's gonna go before they submit a full application, which would then come before the council. The DEM usually doesn't even comment on them, and then we wait until it actually comes in as a full proposal. We did submit some comments on this particular site about habitat concerns, but it has not been reviewed from a fishing perspective yet.
Okay, and when is it scheduled to go before CRMC?
I think it was the December 10th.
It's December 10th.
Okay.
I'll be there. I would appreciate if anybody else would also be there.
Okay. Does the council have any view on that? It's a timely matter. Normally we would,
I just
we would
got the email a
discuss
couple
this
days
in
ago.
another meeting, but because it's a timely matter. Yeah.
Well, I think, as a council, I don't think there's anything we can do formally as a group, given that our process is to review after it's been at CRMC.
Yeah.
So, but I would encourage any of us that can make it and are interested in finding out more about the application to go to the CRMC meeting.
Right. So my understanding is this would not come before the council normally. It will, because it's a viability issue.
That's correct.
So, there's nothing really, we can do, and I don't hear anyone wanting to make a motion, but we support your efforts and are sympathetic.
Thank you.
Great. Any other comments? Yes.
The elimination of the E zone between Point Judith and Block Island.
Yep.
It should be the DEM who brings it to our congressman. They'll carry more clout
Yep.
and have a chance of getting eliminated.
Right. I believe that, Jason, do you care to give an update on, because we did take a position on that?
Yeah, so, Mr. Chair, this is actually the next agenda item, so I could hit, I'll start with
Okay.
Captain Mulvey's, and I'll hit the other two public comments from last time as well.
Okay.
Okay, so, this issue, couple of things. So there is pending federal rule which would provide for transit by state vessels through this part of the EEZ, specifically for summer flounder, black sea bass, and scup. But this doesn't. This is just for state vessels trying to get from Block Island state waters to the rest of Rhode Island state waters. It's not for federally permitted vessels. The legislation that is currently in place. Beyond that, I think you said this, Terry, that, it's to do, I think what you're talking about is kind of like what they have around Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard.
And also, what New York claims, they take right from Montauk right to Watch Hill and all that area in there. And I think Rhode Island should follow suit with their neighboring states and take as much of the resources as we have at our availability. And that should be protected because a lot of flounder are harvested out of there, and we're trying to rebuild flounder stocks. And I can fish beside someone all day long, and I'm allowed 50 pounds, and they can buy them for 25 cents a pound. So there's no shortage of flounder, and they're cheap if you want to buy them. So if they want to buy them, they should be 3 miles outside of Block Island and not just, beside me in the E zone that sits between Point Judith and Block Island.
So it's, we take your comment, don't disagree with you either. I think it's something that we have talked to, in particular our congressional delegation, about. We tried to do a couple of things to give a little bit of flexibility to our fishermen. That's what I just talked about, and then the other stuff is kind of a bigger issue, and I don't have anything to report on that, other than we've discussed it.
All right, because it's been brought up before, we should just have that area not be federal waters. Thank you.
Yep. So the other item that came up during the public comment last time was from Captain Duckworth, who asked about potentially doing a weekly aggregate for skate and monkfish, and I just wanted to report that we will be adding that to a public hearing in the spring. Is that right, Pete?
I'm sorry.
It's okay. I think that's right. Proposed matter, so we're going to take that as affirmation. So we've got that, that'll be coming forward
Yep.
for discussion in the new year.
Yep, cool.
Okay.
And the other thing I wanna touch on is, you said they wanna propose a thing for summer flounder, black sea bass, and scup.
Yep.
It's kinda like a little prejudice. I mean, we all have multi-purpose licenses, so if I come across with a monkfish or a skate, I'd be in violation. Or if
Yeah.
you came across with lobster, you'd be in violation. How do they come up with 3 fish?
It has to do with, we're trying to work through the management plan with the Mid-Atlantic Council, that's why it's
Well,
specific.
monkfish is dealt by the Mid-Atlantic.
Yep, but those 3 species are in a single management plan, that's what we're working on.
Yeah, because that's just kind of, I mean, if you have a multi-purpose license, I mean, I know back a long time, they still have like the striper exemption, right? Is that still on the books?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, that's a kind of, so a guy coming across, if he has a whiting on his boat, he's gonna get arrested. He'd be in a violation, kind of.
Yeah, and it's not ideal to kind of do it in this piecemeal fashion, but it's the
Exactly.
only mechanism that we have right now.
I mean, I know there was a talking about for a while about people, like New York, remember they were trying to fight between Block Island and Montauk, New York was trying to take the ledge over?
Yep, that
That got vetoed.
yep. Right.
What about taking a line from Southeast Lake to Secana Point, going out 3 miles and drawing a straight line?
So,
Yeah.
you know, we're kind of working in the way that we can most
Right.
quickly, and, you know, we're with you, we want to add this flexibility, we just have to do it a certain way.
Yeah.
Okay, any other?
For new business?
Yeah.
I got one more, Dave,
Yep.
just one last follow-up, again from Captain Duckworth. You had asked about the coastal shark stuff, and so we added a link onto one of the MF sizes webpage, the one that's got the information about the minimum sizes and all of that
Cool.
stuff. There's a link on there you can click, and it'll take you right to the website for the feds, where they give all that information on all the different coastal sharks.
Okay.
Okay? That's it.
Thank you. All set?
And then there's the one more we keep saying about it, is multiple licenses on one boat, so you can take a buddy fishing with you, and, you know, we're looking at that again, you know, multiple. They do it Quahog.
I understand. What's the status of that? We've looked at that and multiple licenses on one vessel.
Yep, so we talked about this last meeting, I think, and our position is we're running the Aggregate pilot right now, and we'd like to kind of complete that before. We think this multiple license idea needs to be run through a pilot, just like we're doing for the Aggregate, to generate data to see what it will do. And so we just don't have the capacity to run multiple pilots simultaneously on this sort of
Okay.
thing.
You good with that?
Yep,
Okay.
thank you.
Any other comments? Yes.
Dave, with the AP process kind of shelved, I don't know if this is the right time to bring up black sea bass, but since there isn't a black sea bass AP, and I know it will be the subject of a future meeting for recreational black sea bass, but I'd like to bring it before the council that we need to open recreational black sea bass earlier in the summer than we have, especially this past year. We're getting a lot of feedback from individuals who are catching large black sea bass early in the spring, in May and early June, and they're not allowed to retain those black sea bass. So just bringing it before the council.
Yep.
Don't.
I think we'll be having a workshop where that would be addressed, and then a public hearing as well. So I think maybe the thing to do is, being a recreational fisherman too, we'll get a heads up on when that is, try to get the information that's going to be covered in the workshop, so we can do a little preparing, you know, for that. And as I know the issue, it's always a trade-off. There are some folks that like to have it open later rather than earlier, so I understand. Good point. Okay. Katie is going to move on to the agenda.
Be here any
item.
second.
Please?
You said 3 minutes away about 5 minutes ago.
Yeah, so we'll treat, you know, Katie's item number 5, the Shellfish Advisory Panel. With the council's permission, I'd like to sort of move that until Katie gets here. So, okay. So we'll move on to item number 6, which is, well, we won't move on to that because Katie's going to cover some of that in the beginning, the aquaculture leases, correct?
We could probably have someone else just go over the meeting summary.
I could do number 7 really quick.
Okay, yeah. That's why I was saying we could hold them, we could hold on 5 and 6 and.
Yeah.
Yeah, so why don't we move to number 7?
I can use a lot of words, so maybe comes in. So last meeting, we had brought to you the sector management plan. We talked a little bit about it. It used to be 3 separate documents: finfish, crustaceans, shellfish. We took that, collapsed it into a single document with all 3 of the, you know, what we call sectors. Maybe not the best choice of words, but it's what we've always called them. We've stuck with it. It basically gives you the information that you need to make your licensing recommendation. So it gives stock status, fishery performance, all of that good stuff. So we gave you a draft version of that last time. The very last thing that we put in that document are your recommendations. And so you made your recommendations last meeting. We incorporated those, put them into the plan, and Pete has put them in your packet thing. And so if you've had a chance to take a look at that, that's great, just to make sure we captured what you did correctly. But other than that, I think we would appreciate it if the council's okay with the way it is, to just say that you're okay with it. What we will do at that point is finalize it, and that's done for this year.
If there's no objection, I'd like to approve that by consent unless someone has a comment. Everyone good with that? Okay, so the 2020 sector management plan is approved. So should we move on to the, Pete, do you think we should do the agriculture leases before Katie gets here? Was that what you were thinking?
We can start in on the public hearing stuff if you want, and then just stop when she gets here and recover. Or we can move that stuff to the end. I don't know if the applicant is here, Mr. Chair.
Do we have any aquaculture lease applicants here? Yes, we do.
Richard Panero.
Okay.
So since they're here, and while I'm sure they would enjoy going through the full public hearing docket, what I can do is just hit the first couple till Katie gets here, and then we'll stop, dispense with their stuff. I just heard a door. Let's wait a minute.
Not to like be put on the spot as soon as you walk in.
Someone's gonna be watching our board.
Sit down and do the presentation.
Hey, that's Katie.
Hey, Katie.
Well, we're right at the moment whenever you're ready.
Oh, perfect timing.
Yeah. So we're right at
So I wanted to talk to you about this before, but am I running this whole agenda item, or?
Yeah, and we can jump in with the aquaculture lease part too.
Okay.
Yeah, right, yeah, yep.
Okay. So the summary, I don't know, the minutes are indicative of the meeting, the summary of the meeting. Do you guys have any questions with that?
Yeah, what we would like to seek is approval of the minutes.
Okay.
Formal council approval.
Okay.
So do you care to thumbnail into that meeting, or?
Sure. Okay. Sorry, guys. Yeah, so we had presentations from, we have the 2 aquaculture lease applications, which we will discuss the Pinero, but the one of the ponds went through. Thank you. Thank you. The Tautog pond was had no objection. Are you ready for me to discuss what happened with the Pinero?
The gentlemen are here from there.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay. So
why don't, do we have, yes?
I think we could just run this like
Go
we're
through
doing,
it.
and
Just
run through the
run
meeting
through,
real
okay.
quick, get the minutes
Cool.
approved, and we'll move right on
All
to
right,
aquaculture.
Thank you. So then we had Office of Water Resources presenting the Providence River assessment and just basic overview of what's happening with the proposed opening, the proposed new area, and it's what it will take to open. And then DEM Fisheries also presented their findings for stock assessment, and then we discussed transplants and the opportunity to do a transplant at in the new Providence River site. Then we discussed other transplant areas that people would be identified transplant areas that people would be interested in around the state. Nothing really new came out of it. Then finally the Office of Water Resources talked about the harmful algal bloom protocol, and which led into tagging areas and changing the tagging areas throughout the state. There was a motion made that passed to merge the two tagging areas in Greenwich Bay, and it was unanimous. So that's basically it.
Any questions for Katie, except for the aquaculture leases, because we're going to go over those at the moment. Any comments or questions? So we'll entertain a motion to approve. Motion made to approve the minutes. Is there a second? Seconded by Andy. All those in favor, raise your right hand. So unanimously approved. Minutes are approved. So now we're going to move into the aquaculture leases, and we do have some visuals on that. Pete, is that correct?
Correct.
Are we going to discuss both of them, or just the one that passed, or?
Past is done, so I sent that to the council, no request to bring that here tonight, so we would just probably letter's gonna get sent for that one already.
Okay. So while I was chairing the meeting, we discussed this Pinero application. There was a lot of discussion about the area and the accessibility to different in and around the area. A lot of discussion.
The red is the proposed new area, correct? The green is.
The green, the outermost.
Okay.
In the white square rectangle. And there was a motion to not object, which failed. And after that, due to my inexperience, we had no new motion, so, which ultimately means that this application has come to council without a motion, without any objection from the SAP.
So, I'm sorry, so there was a motion, just so it's clear.
So there was a motion to not object to which means
So
that.
to
approve.
approve.
Basically,
Yep.
to recommend,
Yep.
to council that there was
And
no, that failed.
That did not.
And so, I didn't realize that we needed to make a new motion to object to the application. So, we never did that. And then, so, how it comes to council now is that there's no objection from the SAP, but ultimately, that's not indicative of the consensus from the SAP. So, I don't know if I'm supposed to be presenting his lease application without Dave, or if that's.
Yep. Well, I think we all received this ahead of time, and does the applicant care to comment on the project at this point?
Specifically, it was just that they were worried about boating traffic was the main issue. Other than that, one other thing that was discussed was that North Kingston wants to limit topwater gear here. which they did, and those are actually shown on that. So ours is the green one to the right, and one of the red ones is also a pending application, I believe. So once those two are done, they're done in this area. And those are the two big issues, so.
Does the division care to comment on the lease application? I know there was a letter, no objection.
Yeah, hold up to Anna, if you want to speak to that.
Yeah, we didn't have any objections because we didn't see any actual impact to fish habitat in that area. A lot of the concerns that were voiced, as Katie said in the staff, were concerns with recreational use of the area and access to the shoreline in that particular section, for like commercial or recreational shellfishing. But the division didn't, as a whole, have any objections to this thing.
Katie, the comments, the reason why it was, what were some of the comments that why people did not want to approve it?
It was mostly just access, and nothing was ever mentioned about the impact it would have on the exploitation of marine resources, which is what
Yep.
the goal of, the role of
Right.
the staff is to do.
And I'm glad Katie mentioned that, just to make it clear. Our charge is, the Marine Fisheries Council shall review the application to determine whether the agriculture activities proposed in the application are consistent with competing uses engaged in the exploitation of marine fisheries. So that's our charge.
Yes, just a question. I have it on the packet and I can see it up there, but it's a little hard for me to tell exactly what's going on that map. But I'm looking at it and I'm hearing from Katie that one of the objections was access, and yet this green rectangle that is being proposed seems to be on the outside, seaward of some larger areas that are already established or proposed to be established. So it's not clear to me how that area would be obstructing access to anything. So if anybody has some further information on that, I'd like to hear it.
I have something to say. We did put it in the place where it is now, because you can see it's kind of in line to leave access to the shoreline. And we are the farthest out, towards the middle of the bay. And to be honest, the ones that are closest in, those would be the ones to kind of limit the access to the shore and everything like that. But we both have boats, and my dad and my brother both have a commercial fishing license where this is the whole area where we go. And honestly, nothing that's over there is in the way of anything from where we like to go. And we placed ours to make sure that we wouldn't limit access to anybody for anything. So.
Thank you.
No problem.
Any other light shed on this topic by the division?
No.
Yes.
On the basis of lack of not much testimony in the way of impact on captured fisheries, I vote that I propose a motion for not to object.
So motion made by Mike not to object. Is there a second? We have a second as well. Now discussion, any discussion, any comments or questions? With no comments or questions, we'll call the motion. All those in favor of not objecting, and I think that was the motion. Here it is right up here. Motion to recommend the director that the aquaculture lease application is consistent with the competing uses engaged in the exploitation of marine resources. Made by Dr. Rice, seconded by Mr. Reen. So all those in favor, raise your right hand. So it's unanimous. It's approved. Nice job. So the next item on the agenda, under aquaculture leases, I think we've pretty much made a recommendation there. So we've done item number 7. So now we're getting to the meat of the agenda, which is the November 12th public hearing items. And just to recap how we're going to proceed, it's the way that we always proceed with these things. We'll have some slides in a presentation, not necessarily a presentation, but some slides and background information. And then we'll go to the division to get their point of view. And then we'll go to the council for questions and, well, actually to make a motion if we feel so inclined. And then we'll open it up for discussion and questions and then take a vote. So that said, we'll move right on to the Tautog over harvest provision.
Yep, so, Mr. Chair, I'll basically give the intro on these. Then I'll stop, and then when you're ready to come back and give the division perspective, I'd be happy to do that.
Okay.
If I could offer one more thing. We've been thinking about how to have this meeting run efficiently, so there'll be a couple of spots here and there where I might suggest to the council how they might want to break up an item, not this one, but one or two of the others. It's just to help. Please ignore me if you have a plan already or don't like my idea, but I'm just trying to help. So I just want to,
sure.
Even though I won't be offended if you say that's a terrible idea, we're going to do it this way. Okay. So the first item here is to remove the provision that specifies quota management for Tautog overharvest. So what we had on the books previously, Tautog had 3 sub-periods, and I think it was last year or 2 years ago, the council recommended to get rid of the summer sub-period. Within the Tautog regulations, it specified that any overharvest would be deducted specifically from the summer sub-period. And so that doesn't exist anymore. And so what you're looking at here is us striking that language about taking it directly from the summer sub-period and dealing with the Tautog like we do for many of the other species by kind of taking it off the top and then prorating it into the remaining 2 sub-periods. So that's what this one's about.
And do you care to add any division perspective, or Remanessence got it right?
Yeah, it's implicit. We think this is a good idea
Okay.
for Tautog.
Right. Entertain a motion. So motion made by Chris that we approve the removal of the specification for the Tautog overharvest as noted here in the annotated language. Okay, so motion made. Is there a second? Second by Mike. And we'll wait for the motion to come up on the screen here. So there's the motion. It's open for discussion. Motion recommended the director to adopt the amendment as proposed. Any discussion on that? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor, raise your right hand. It's unanimous, so approved. So the next item on that list is the proposed high grading rule. Is that correct? Yes.
Yep. So this we had put forward. We had been asked over the years a number of times to develop a high grading regulation. We do not have one on the books, and so we developed this language. I think it was partially modeled after what they have in Massachusetts, and so we thought this would be a good time to bring a high grading rule forward for the public hearing and for the council to review. And so this is what we proposed, the language that we proposed that's up on the board for you.
So we did have obviously this went out like all these items did. We had a workshop and we had a hearing, and there were extensive comments on this item. Does the council have any further questions about this item?
seek any additional information on this item?
Guess I would just ask about enforcement. I don't know if there's anybody from the division on enforcing this.
So I don't like to, if it's okay, Mr.
Sure.
Chair, I don't like to speak for enforcement. I don't believe we have an enforcement officer here. What I can say is what I heard at the workshop on this topic, and I think a lot of the discussion at the workshop pivoted around, when are you possessing it? When would you be in violation? With regard to high grading, Sergeant Shipper, who was at the meeting, said, it's kind of a subjective part of all of this, and so an officer would use their discretion at the scene to determine if it's obvious that the person had taken that fish with the intent to keep it. They would make that determination at the scene, as opposed to somebody who had it on board with the intent to throw it back over. So that's what the discussion hinged around. That's what Sergeant Shipper said to us during the meeting, is that they would use their discretion at the scene on a case-by-case basis.
Yes, Chris. I was unable to, I was out of town during the hearing, so I wasn't able to attend that, but Jason, perhaps you can tell me, or somebody else who may have been there. I'm curious about, Tautog being exempt from this prohibition. Are there other fish that are exempt from this prohibition, and why would Tautog be, what is it biologically about Tautog that would make it okay to do for Tautog but not for other fish?
Yep, I think that's an excellent question. So in the case of Tautog, the difference is there's a known and utilized live market for Tautog. And so one of the problems, as we were constructing the language, in general, you take a fish and you harvest it, it's dead, or it's going to die soon. For Tautog, you're actually trying to maintain that animal alive to get it to market, and so that is why we kind of put this stipulation in there for Tautog. Just to be fair, I think there were comments that there are other species that same sort of thing occurs on. I'm not aware of those, and so that's why we did not put anything like that into this language.
Thank you, Jason.
Any further clarification on anything? We'll entertain any kind of motion. Yes?
Jason, would it be more to the point that the specification wouldn't be necessarily to talk, but a sort of a live maintenance, or a specified live maintenance type tank or something like that? Then you're covering your bases a little bit better.
Yeah, I think it's a fair point, and so that could be an amendment to this language that the council could offer. I will say, I think we thought about that a little bit as well, and it becomes, it's already kind of a problematic regulation to enforce, and I think if we then adopt something like that, it gets really difficult to specify the parameters of the live well, and it becomes a morass of trying to construct a language that's going to meet every conceivable version of that out there, which is why we focused on Tautog as the one known, live product that people prosecute in our state waters.
Anyone? Yes.
I think with the way markets are changing, this could create a problem down the road, because there is a demand for live species of fish, whether it's cunners, black sea bass, or blackfish. So I think I was going to bring up the enforcement end of it before, just because, number one, we have a limited number of enforcement agents and a large number of vessels and licenses, and it doesn't seem to be an enforceable rule. It just, to me, it seems kind of outrageous. And we are gonna, I mean, we're gonna put a rule in place that at some point could limit somebody that wants to sell live fish to a dealer. I mean, there's growing markets for live fish. So I think this could turn into a headache for us, enforcement-wise and market-wise down the road.
We're not going to go to the audience unless a council member wants to go to the audience for additional information.
Why not? Bring it on.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, Al Eagles, I'm a commercial fisherman in Rhode Island. Been a fisherman for over 50 years, and I was at the workshop. And the problem I see with it is it's going to be a discretionary call by the EPO. And under those circumstances, I wouldn't want to see any regulation put in where it's left up to the individual EPO to make his decision whether it's legal or not legal. And the other thing I'd like to say is, in a case like a dragger, sometimes they have 2,000 or 3,000 pounds of fish on deck, and black sea bass is the bulk of them. So I don't know how you would consider this a high grading regulation. Are they going to pick out the first 50 pounds closest to them and call it their catch? Or is it discarding thousands of pounds of fish, they're going to pick out the fish worth the most money, which are the jumbos? So it's not a regulation. I mean, I'm all for regulations to conserve resources, but I don't think this is a very viable regulation, and I don't see how it can be really enforced where it's a discretionary.
Thank you. Thank you
All
for
right,
your
thank you.
comments. Any motions either way on this? We'd like to sort of give our point of view to the director, so. No motions either way on this item? Yes. Chris?
I mean, I'm just trying to formulate an opinion before I volunteer to make a
Okay.
motion that might not be well educated. But, so the high grading prohibition, I'm just saying this out loud, and Jason, if you've got a response, or Pete. Returning legal fish after they've been taken into possession for the purposes of retaining other more desirable fish is prohibited for any fish except at this point if we were to move this way for Tautog. I have to agree with this gentleman here. It just seems like a very difficult thing because, in one case you might be catching fish and putting them in a live box, but in other cases you might just have them in a hold or in a pile on the deck. I mean, what really is the difference? Maybe I don't understand what goes on the boat well enough to say so, but it seems to me that this really is kind of a, this is almost a high grade. This high grading thing is almost, why are we picking just that fish? And I understand that there's a live market, but as Jason points out, markets change all the time.
Yeah.
And I feel like we could be boxing ourselves
Right,
into a corner.
we'll definitely entertain a motion. We'd like to give the director a point of view either way on this. So is there a motion to be made?
I'd like to make a motion to not establish this rule.
Okay. Motion made not to establish it by Jason, seconded by Andy. Any discussion on this item further?
I just want to make one other comment, which is it also opens up the door to selective enforcement. And as he made the point, it's like if it's up to the discretion of the officer, I think that opens the door to a lot of headaches that a lot of guys don't really need.
Okay. Any further discussion?
Clarification, this is commercial and recreational or commercial?
This was just a general high grading definition, so it applied across the board.
So no other comments or discussion? I'll call the question. And again, the motion is to recommend to the director to not adopt the provision as proposed. All those in favor of that motion, raise your right hand. All those opposed? So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 approved and one opposed. Great. So we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is black sea bass.
Okay, so for black sea bass, per our standard process, we notice all of the species that begin new on the new year. Black sea bass is one of those. We did not put any changes out to notice. We are getting an increase in quota. It's significant for next year. However, when I was looking at our performance in the black sea bass fishery versus the amount of quota that we're getting, so it's good news we're getting more quota. I don't think it's enough to dramatically change our management at this point. It's not going to be like we're going to leave fish on the table. I think at best, given our current management, we will hopefully have shorter closed periods. Maybe we might get through one of those seasons without a closure, but that's under the current management process. So looking at that, thinking about catch rates and what is available to us, we did not propose any changes. During the process, we did get one proposal, I think it's the next slide, Nicole, one proposal from industry, and that was to bump the wintertime possession limit, not the allocation, the possession limit from 500 up to 750. And we think that one is viable. It's an aggregate during that period of time. There's not a lot of people, in fact, that sub-period has performed really well with the aggregate over the past couple of years. It hasn't closed, I don't think, or the closures weren't very long if it did. So that one was a very specific proposal that we saw. That's the bottom one there under the red font. Then during the workshop, there were a number of other things that came up, different variants of what we could do. And so we did our best to kind of capture what was talked about. There was no real specific proposal made, though. And so that's kind of where we're on this one. So we have status quo. We've got one very specific proposal about a very specific period of time, and then a number of other potential proposals that the council could entertain.
One item, and it's probably up there, was a conflict with Massachusetts in July. Is that correct? Is that reflected in one of those?
So that was definitely an item of discussion. It might be one of the bullets, or implicit in one of the bullets there.
Yeah.
One of the discussions was trying to offset Rhode Island from Massachusetts. That comes up in a couple of different fisheries. I would offer my perspective on that type of approach, and that is anytime that we go to change, Massachusetts could change simultaneously. It's like bringing a batter up to the plate and bringing a left-handed pitcher in, and then the manager swaps the batter out for a righty, and it's one of these things that's hard to keep track of. So I don't know if that's an effective approach to take, but if it could be, if you think that's viable. That was one of the options in there. That had to do with the summer sub-period discussion. I think it's kind of within the first two bullets there.
And there were no other proposals, or were there?
That's it.
That's it. So, do you have any further division perspective on this other than what you said?
So status quo is obviously okay. This alternative, we also think would be manageable. And then where we end up with the rest of it it depends on which one you pick. I think some of the parameters that we think about are, if you make a sub-period allocation really low, we can't manage it. If it's too small, our ability to control the catch rates is impossible at like 5, 10, 15%. So anything like that, we would not favor. But any of the other options, the continuum of options that are up there, as long as, you know, I'll be kind of listening to you and thinking about those parameters that we care about, but beyond that, I think it's fair game.
Okay. An interesting thing is that even though there are substantially more fish on the table, the division feels that there'll be no trouble using those fish. There are not going to be fish on the table, that we close sub-periods frequently and quickly. And those fish, we would still have closures even with those fish, more than likely.
It is still pretty likely in my view. And it's just because the fish are so available.
Yep.
One thing to add to that perhaps is remember that we still retain the authority if we are lagging behind and we don't think we'll achieve a sub-period, we have the authority to increase that daily possession limit. So, and that's what we do for other species. And so that's what we were thinking, you know, the status quo is a good spot to start. And if we do see that we're underperforming, we can go from 50 to 75 or 100 or something like that.
Mike, did you have a question?
Yeah, I actually had a motion on this, and the motion is to maintain the status quo with the proviso that this alternative industry proposal is part of it.
The 750
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll second.
Oh, Mike, I'm sorry, Mike seconded. So it's open for discussion. Any comments? Jason, being a commercial?
Yeah, I think status quo, I think, would help the fishery not close after 2 weeks of being open, which everybody that's in at least the rod and reel end of it knows it's a pretty quick season.
Yep.
Each time it opens, it's closed in about 2 weeks. It'd be nice to see it open all year.
Yeah.
I mean, that might help us keep the price steady and be able to fish for them the same time we're fishing for fluke. It's pretty sad to throw them back most of the summer.
Okay. Any other comments? You good? You good? Yes.
Like from the hearing, it seemed like there was a lot of discussion, and it seemed a lot more nuanced than status quo. People were talking about taking out sub-periods and kind of restructuring a little bit, and I don't think we're really giving the public, doing them service if we're not, you know, taking into consideration. There was a really vocal.
Would you like to go to the?
Yeah, I'd love to.
Okay.
Let
Let's try
Al
someone
Let Al
at the
start.
top just to mix it up. Mr. Duckworth.
We talked about at the meeting, like you were saying, we're talking about actually taking some of the winter period and actually putting it when the state of Rhode Island fishermen could actually catch it in state waters. You know, pretty much from November on, sea bass are gone in state waters. They don't show back up to April. You know, so I mean, I mean, it's kind of a dicey thing taking it from a guy in the winter or something, but I remember there were a lot of people talking about, you know, trying to really do what you could do for the state water guys.
Okay.
And then they were talking about, I don't remember exactly what the dates were, they were talking about changing them around, making like maybe like a little time, I think it was Dean, the other guy was talking about when it's closed, maybe like in, if you put it up, I think it's like August or something, that you can't land sea bass, is that?
Yeah.
There's like a whole August closure, and they're talking about the Massachusetts, so
I think that the council did get all of those comments.
Well, I mean, I just haven't seen anything to say up there that, you know, change around some of the numbers of where the fish go. That's why I think that's what she's talking about, right?
Next.
All right, quickly, I want to comment on that industry proposal. Last year, that sub-period opened at 500. I'm assuming they were under harvesting because DEM bumped it up to 750, and then they ended up going over and taking percentage away from the rest of the year. So I would be against that, or I guess if it is happening with the caveat that DEM bring it back down to not go over, because this summer sea bass is clearly becoming very important for a big number of state waters fishermen.
Well,
and as to the discussion, avoiding mass, so mass opens the first week of July, so it involves typically, as last year, the May 1st sub-period will run through mid-June, we'll close for a couple weeks, we'll open up July 1st. We got about 3-4 days of great prices, and then I think this year mass opened July 8th, and the price went right from $5 to $3 for jumbos, at least for me, and I think most others. So there was some discussion around just making May 1st through June 30th and July 1st through July 31st one big sub period and running it, which with this quota increase, I think it will probably happen because we closed for about the last 2 weeks of June. So I don't know if actually changing it would have any effect, but with the more quota, we might close down for 3 or 4 days at the end of June and reopen July 1st. To me, it would make more sense to just leave those 3 or 4 days open when the prices are high versus the tail end of July when the prices are low. And then other fishermen mentioned the November sub period as weather's getting bad. They don't want to be out the time of year. They would rather have it in the September 15th sub period.
Right.
But personally, I would more support the modifying the spring and summer ones to avoid Massachusetts.
Okay. Any additional comments? Different?
Yeah, Al Eagles. There was a lot of public comment at that workshop from different fishermen, mostly state water fishermen. In fact, there were no offshore fishermen at the meeting, saying they'd like to eliminate that winter sub-period altogether and spread it to the other sub-periods. And there was a lot of public comment about that and for enforcement for that, encouragement for that. And I don't see it it wasn't on the bullet points there, so I think it was a
Thank you.
issue missed.
Appreciate it. Gentleman in the back there?
It's been that the winter quota goes around, catches up the fish, and when it comes April, by the time it hit mid-April, it's closed. So when fish come to us, we can't have any. So maybe we go up and get 750 come January 1st, we'll come April 30th. It isn't gonna make, maybe mid-April, maybe even April 1st.
No.
They're not gonna be able to go, there's gonna be zero.
Okay, so we got some diverse opinions and additional input. Good? You're good? Okay. And the motion that is on the floor right now, and it's been seconded, is to recommend to the director the adoption of status quo while increasing January to April 30th sub-period possession limit to 750 pounds per vessel per week. So that motion was made by Dr. Rice, seconded by Mike. Is there any further discussion? Yes.
Yeah, just after hearing this, because I couldn't make it to the workshop. I wouldn't increase the winter sub-period. I mean, I would vote not to increase that. Just, I think we should see what we end up with. We've got an increase in quota, but see if we can end up where everybody gets a fair slice of the pie before increasing anywhere.
Was the motion to was the comment to decrease?
The comment was to keep it at 500 pounds in the winter.
Yeah.
Instead of 750. So I'd like to, I mean, I guess that brings it back to, I'd like to make a motion to keep it status quo.
Okay, yeah, amend the motion to leave it at 500.
Yes.
I'll second.
So we have an amended motion on the floor, so we should, which would be to keep it at 500, and that was seconded. So can I have a point of order here as to, do we vote on the amended motion? So the amended motion, it's not up there, but let's just state it. It's to keep it status quo and not have the 750 pound per vessel limit January 1 to April 30th. So we're voting on an amendment right now. Motion to amend, to recommend to the director. Yes.
It might be easier if the person who made the original motion withdrew that motion, because that first motion was essentially for industry proposals. And so if that individual wants to withdraw that motion, then you can make a new motion on the table for status quo.
Do you care to withdraw that motion? The
original Mike's original motion.
I don't mind withdrawing the motion.
Okay.
The seconder?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay. All right, so both the person that made the motion and seconded do not mind withdrawing that motion.
That motion is withdrawn, so now we can make a new motion.
Okay.
Okay, new motion, keep it status quo.
So there's a motion made to keep it status quo and seconded by Mike. Any discussion? Yes.
So when we were discussing the additional 250 pounds per week during the winter period, we heard from Jason that it seemed like there's enough fish to be able to accommodate that. So what I'm curious about is, are we talking about still the ability sometime later on to bring in more fish? Or are we just gonna go with status quo for the, I hear a lot of fishermen saying there's value in black sea bass, they wanna be able to maximize their fishing effort and their ability to sell fish, so are we now leaving 250 pounds of fish
I think
that won't be accessed?
Yeah, but I think we can, Jason, but Jason did say that we have, we're gonna use all the fish, you know, and the division can, you know, enhance.
Just wanna make sure of that before we vote. Yeah.
Yep, so that's accurate, what the chairman said, and so our policy is always, whether it starts at 500, we're trying to get to 0 for each sub-period, so that each sub-period gets the allocation that they were set to get. And so if we're lagging behind, we have the authority to bump that up to make sure that we get to 0. So we won't necessarily be leaving fish on the table.
Any further questions or comments? So we'll call the motion just so it's clear. The motion is to recommend, no, that's, motion to recommend to the director the adoption of status quo. So all those in favor, raise your right hand. It's unanimous. So the next item is Scup.
So Scup is pretty straightforward. We noticed the current management for Scup and did not propose any modifications to Scup. So and I don't believe there was much discussion on Scup at all. So that's what we have is status quo. But again, if there are any changes to that, we'd be open to them.
And that's obviously the division's recommendation is status quo.
Recommendation, but it's not that we wouldn't
Entertain.
Right.
Okay. Yes, Mike?
I'd like to move to maintain the status quo.
Motion made, is there a second? Seconded by Andy. Just gonna try to mix it up a little bit. So we do have a motion on the floor to accept the status quo recommendation for Scup, and it's been seconded. Do we have any questions or comments from council? Any questions or comments? So with no questions or comments, motion to recommend to the director to maintain status quo with Scup. All those in favor, raise your right hand. It's unanimous. Thank you. Summer Flounder?
Okay. So for summer flounder, we are also getting an increase in quota for summer flounder. And we had actually noticed a couple of different things that were generated out of the workshop. So the first was to increase the starting possession limit during the May 1 through September 15th subperiod from 50 to 100 pounds per vessel per day. And then what we noticed was there was discussion about raising the wintertime aggregate limit. And so we went back and investigated what we thought that increase could go to. And so what we noticed, we weren't given any specifics at the workshop, so we just kind of took the comments that were occurring and developed what we thought met those comments. And so we believe that we can raise that wintertime aggregate amount to 2,000 pounds per vessel per bi-week period or fortnight, as we like to say at the division. And so those were two of the notice changes. There was then a proposal that, a specific proposal that came forward from industry. Again, that one recommended a change from 50 to 100 during May 1 through September, which is consistent with the one that we had noticed. But then the second was to amend the starting possession limit for the summer flounder aggregate landing program from 1,500 pounds per bi-week to 1,500 pounds per week. And the other important nuance here is that these will begin on January 1st rather than right now. The aggregate doesn't start until the beginning of February. That again was one of those that was put in place to offset us from Massachusetts that I think has the necessity for that has gone away over the years. So, so you've got, let me go back through those in case I've confused you at this point. So there was originally some notice proposals, 50 to 100 in the summer sub period, and then opening up January 1st with the aggregate and raising that to 2,000 pounds, but the 2,000 pounds would be for the existing 2-week period. And then the industry proposal was similar to that, but instead of the 2,000 pounds, it would be 1,500 per week. And so I'll leave it there. I will offer you a little bit of advice. I think there's 2 things going on here. The first is you might want to dispense with the summer sub-period starting possession limit. Seems like something you could tackle. And then you could think through that winter aggregate, the winter aggregate changes.
So the division's recommendation is what again? Is it the first one, which is 2,000 pounds per vessel per bi-week, correct?
Yep. So maybe I could offer a little bit more. We think the industry proposal of 1,500 per week is a little too high, but the analogous of going to the weekly aggregate is what they were after. You could simply take that 2,000 per 2 weeks and change it to 1,000 per week. So that's maybe a compromise.
Okay. And so your feeling was, in terms of procedure, is that to consider that, but also what in regard to the summer flounder program?
So I think the easiest one where there was a lot of consistency is the 500, the 50 to 100 for the summer sub period. Okay. So that might be one motion. And then the second one, the second motion that you make could then tackle this aggregate piece.
Or we could just, I'm sorry, we could go back to the other one. So we could just consider this as it is, correct? Except change the 2,000 to 1,000. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yes.
I might be ambitious, but I'll make the motion that we, the proposal that we move to 100 pounds per day in the May to September 15th period, and we move to 1,000 pounds per week in the winter sub period.
Okay.
And do it all in one vote.
Okay.
Okay. Second.
Alrighty, so Chris made the motion, seconded by Mike, and we'll wait for Nicole to sort of put that up for us to look at. But I think we know what that motion is. Is there any discussion, comments?
Yeah, I've got one for Jay. I know that toward the tail end of the aggregate, we kept increasing the volume. It did cause some downward pressure on price because of the other states. And that was one of the concerns of the industry about starting off with a higher quota and trying to be consistent throughout, take the ups and downs of the price in the market. So do you feel like you would have to make adjustments up in an upward fashion towards the tail end?
Yep, so if it's okay, Mr. Chair, I think it's a fair question, and so a couple of caveats with our analysis that got us to that 2,000 pounds is we're basically taking the catch rates from that February period and applying them back into January. And so if you, as folks that are more familiar with the industry and the dynamics, think that the catch rates in February are going to be higher than January, then there is some buffer in there. We tend towards being conservative on those because of the fact that we can adjust up if we're underperforming. So we have that authority.
Right.
I don't think that was your question though, so I think we were conservative in that 2,000 pounds.
It's fine.
Good, Mike?
Yeah.
Any further questions or comments? So seeing none, we'll call the motion, and the motion is to recommend to the director to adopt the opening of the Summer Flounder Aggregate Landing Program on the Sunday of the first full week in January instead of the Sunday of the first full week in February, increasing the starting possession limit in January 1 to 30th sub-period from 1,500 pounds per vessel per bi-week to 1,000 pounds per vessel per week, and increasing the starting possession limit in the May 1 to September 15th sub-period from 50 pounds per day to 100 pounds per day. So that is the motion. All those in favor, raise your right hand. It's unanimous. Thank you. So we are on to Bluefish.
On to Bluefish. So I'll start off with a couple of things for you to consider. The 2020 commercial quota the commercial quota is going to be about 188 to 189,000 pounds. This is similar to the 2019 initial quota, but the big change here is that there is not going to be any rollover from the recreational fishery this year, and so there's been this consistent subsidy to the commercial quotas from the recreational side because the recreational sector has not been getting their quota in recent years, and so Bluefish was assessed this year. The stock assessment was not favorable, poor stock status for Bluefish. And so there's a big decrease coming in the overall total allowable catch, and that impacts this in that there's likely not going to be any fish to roll over into the commercial fishery. So a little bit of background there. What we noticed for changes are two things. These were generated from the workshop. The first was to increase the minimum size from 12 inches up to 18 inches. And then the second was to decrease the starting possession limit during the May through November subperiod from 8,000 to 6,000 pounds per vessel per day. And that was what we noticed, and again, that was generated from the workshop participants by and large.
Sorry, was there a comment? For a week?
I think I'm seeing day and week. Am I confused on the possession limit? One of those.
Yes,
Oh,
you're right.
yeah, that's a typo.
Okay. Yeah.
Should be.
Per week. Should be per week, yep.
Yep.
So in
It now says week. No.
Yeah, that's right. So we'll entertain a motion.
Yeah, why not?
Yes, Jake.
Make a motion to accept the changes as proposed.
So it's motion made by Jason as proposed, seconded by Katie. So any discussion on that motion? Any comments or questions? Seeing none, motion to recommend to the director to adopt increasing the minimum size from 12 to 18 inches and to decrease the starting possession limit May 1 to the second Saturday, May 1 to second Saturday in November subperiod from 8,000 pounds per week to 6,000 pounds per week. All those in favor, raise your right hand. It's unanimous. Thank you. So now, commercial menhaden.
Okay, so commercial menhaden, there's nothing that's kind of incentivizing us to change at this point. There's no changes for 2020 that are dictated to us from anyone else. And so we anticipate the 2020 commercial quota will be similar to exactly the same as that That was in place in 2019. And so we've not proposed any changes. And maybe I'll just take a moment. I don't know if folks are aware, but the owner, Rick Sousa, the owner of Park, they passed away this year. To our knowledge, we're not sure if, what they're doing with the business. And so I just thought I'd mention that's pretty sad. Happened kind of suddenly during the fishing season.
So, well, thank you for sharing that. So we're not, do we need a motion on this item at all?
Yeah, so I think it's always a prerogative. If you do nothing, then the advice you're giving is status. You're not making any recommendation, which would be advice for status.
We can, do I hear a motion? Yes, Andy.
Motion for status quo.
Andy made a motion for status quo. Second. Chris already seconded. I apologize. I'm not fast enough. Seconded by Chris. Do we have any discussion? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor of approving status quo for the commercial management of menhaden, signify by raising your right hand. Unanimous. Thank you. Proposed ocean pout prohibition, I guess, is the next item.
Yep, so the next, actually the next two items are the latest chapter in us trying to sync up our regulations with the federal plans for these species that are predominantly federally managed species. And so ocean pout is currently prohibited in federal waters, and so we are suggesting or recommending that we adopt the same prohibition in state waters.
Any questions? Okay, I'll entertain a motion. So, yes.
I'd like to make the motion to synchronize with the federal rule on possession and prohibited in state waters.
Seconded by Mike. Motion made by Mike and seconded by Mike.
Different mics.
Different mics. So is there any comments or discussion, any questions on that? So, motion to recommend to the director to prohibit the harvest, landing, or possession of ocean pout in the ocean waters of Rhode Island. All those in favor signify by raising your right hand. Unanimous. So Wolffish is a similar situation?
Same exact situation here. I don't know when the last time someone caught a wolffish in state waters was, but
this winter. I caught one this past winter in the bay.
Hey.
Yeah, north of Newport Bridge.
So it's a federally prohibited, and we're recommending adopting the same for state waters.
Motion, Chris?
I move that we prohibit Atlantic wolffish.
It's crazy.
I have pictures of it, yeah, in a lobster pond.
Motion made by Chris, seconded by Andy. Any comments or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of recommending to the director to prohibit the harvest, landing, or possession of Atlantic bullfish in the marine waters of Rhode Island signify by raising your right hand. It's unanimous, thanks. And I think we moved this next item according to our revised agenda, it's Part 12 Research Pilot Aggregate Program.
Yep. Can I have the laser beam, please? So we're giving you a little bit more background here. I know that not all of you are at the workshop, and so we're presenting you a little bit more information than you normally would for these, just so you have the background for this one. So, just to orient you to what we're talking about, the council approved the creation of a pilot program to run an aggregate pilot program for 2 species, summer flounder and black sea bass. We ran that during 2019. We originally constructed it to have 3 vessels and I think 5 different sectors, that being lobster pot, trawl gear, kind of broken out by gear, gill net, and on, and you'll see that in the graphs that we'll show you. So we created the pilot. There were stipulations. The vessels had to put a vessel monitoring system on their vessel. They had to report electronically. The idea behind the pilot, we talked about aggregate programs on and on over the years, and there's often conflict in the community as to whether we should move them forward. And often one of the retorts we get is, well, you don't know what's going to happen. You're just guessing at what you think the effect might be. And those people were right. So that's why we did the pilot, so that we could generate some data to see what would happen if this were implemented across different types of vessels, and what effects that would have on catch rates and numbers of trips taken and things like that. So that was the background. I'm going to orient you to these plots. This very first one, there it is. This very first one is the trip data. So these are the numbers of trips that the different vessels took in 2019. So your y-axis is the number of trips per year that were taken. And then along the bottom, where each of these box plots are on the x-axis, you have the fish pot gear, gill net gear, lobster pot, multi-gear. These are people who use multiple gears during their fishing operations, rod and reel, and trawl. And then within the plot, what you see is a box plot. A box plot is one of the ways that we can represent uncertainty around a mean. So the box represents the dark line in the middle is the mean. That would be basically your answer that you would get. But then the rest of the box represents the uncertainty around that mean. And then the whiskers represent the full range of the data. The box is 2014 through 2018, the mean trips taken by the fishermen in these various gear categories. And then finally, the red dots represent the individuals that were in this gear type in 2019 in the pilot. So this is the average of the people that fish pots, how many trips they would take. And the red dot is what they took under the aggregate pilot. And basically what this one shows you is that you're basically not seeing a lot of difference in your fish pot gear type as far as the number of trips taken. For the gill net, it's kind of a range. You had one individual that fished a little bit more, but pretty close to what is happening on average. And then 2 that fished a little bit, took less trips than they took in previous years. Lobster pot looks about exactly the same as the number of trips. And then multi-gear, again, either below or about average. The rod and reel took less trips. And then trawl gear, they all tended to take less trips. So one of the things we were trying to figure out with this program is, would this allow fishermen to be more efficient? And the answer we got back from this single year of the pilot is, they are either on doing about the same number of trips or less, depending on the gear type. So the next plot, now we're going to start looking at some species-specific information. This is the landings from May through September. So here we have pounds of fluke landed on the y-axis, and again, those different categories of gear. And again, you see the fish pot, the landings were about the same. For gill net, you had one individual who landed a lot more, but then the other 2 that were about average. Lobster pot was about the same as they did. This is for summer flounder, and that same as 0. Which maybe
They didn't participate in that fishery.
exactly. In the multi-gear, you've got a mixed bag, one below, one within the, that range of uncertainty, and then one above. Rod and reel landed a little bit more. And then trawl, you had 2 that did about the same amount as they had in previous years, and 1 that did a little bit better. Next is black sea bass, same information plotted for them. Here we see a little bit more where the participants were able to do a little bit better as far as the landings. So for fish pot, gill net, lobster pot, they all did a little bit better under the pilot than they had previously. The multi-gear, 2 of them still did about average, 1 did a little bit better. The rod and reel did about the same, and then trawl again was average to less for black sea bass. The next now, so that was just straight landings, which conflates with some of the other things going on, like the fact that there was a little bit more fluke available last year, things like that. So what we did to standardize things is we looked at catch rates. So the y-axis, don't get confused by the language here. It is what it is. It's the deviation in fluke catch from the fleet, and this is pounds per trip. So now this is a rate. We're standardizing by the number of trips taken, but we're doing it relative to this blue line here. The blue line represents the overall mean from 2014 to 2019 for the whole fishery, in this case, summer flounder. So that's why that's situated at 0. And then we looked at the pilot participants relative to that 0. So if the gear types are underneath the blue line, that means they caught their catch rate was less under the pilot, meaning, and that could happen in 2 ways, right? There's a numerator and a denominator. So they could have caught more with less trips or vice versa. But in the end, their catch rates were lower. And then the ones that end up above, the catch rates are higher than average. So again, the box plots represent these unique individuals' past performance, and the red dots represent their performance under the pilot. So here we start to see that we've got 2 of the gill net participants, their catch rates went up for fluke under the pilot. Here's one where it was below, though, but it was also below their past performance. Same for the multi-gear. You have one that their catch rates were lower than the average, but also lower than their past performance. I don't know where the red dot is for that group there. But then here's another one where the performance was better than the fishery on average and above their past performance. You see the same for the rod and reel, but it's pretty close. Then you've got one trawl participant that did a lot better under the program for fluke, one that did average, and then the final one that did a lot better. They also, in the past, performed better than average as well. So that's fluke. And then for black sea bass, this one, it's a bit more of a clear picture where the aggregate, you're starting to see these red dots all up above both their box plots and the blue line. So the participants for black sea bass did really well with regard to their catch rates under the pilot. They were much more efficient under the pilot than they were given their individual past performance and the performance of the fishery in general. There are still some mixed signals, though. The trawl gear here basically for these 2 individuals underperformed, and I think that was just a matter of if they get them when they're fishing for other things, they'll keep them, but they weren't targeting them. That was kind of the feedback we got back on that. I was really curious about that result. So I believe that is it for the plots. Maybe I'll just continue on here. And so what we would like to do is, we saw some signals that were pretty clear, but a lot of mixed signals. And so we feel, the division feels that we need a little bit more information before we can put forward a report to you that says we think these effects are going to occur from this type of a program. So we would like to see it extended for at least 2 more years. 3 years would give us, I think a good set of information to tease out which of these things were anomalous for this 1 year and which are going to be consistent patterns. We also think we had a little bit of, interestingly, we had trouble getting participants, applicants. We filled a couple of them, gillnet, trawl, but we actually had to kind of host the application process to regenerate some interest, and then some of the categories we never got the 3 we were looking for. So we think we could actually expand a little bit. We didn't see any negative consequences to the overall fishery from this pilot. We'd like to definitely keep this cohort intact and move them forward. We're not going to force them to participate, of course, but I think in general they all liked the program and felt good about it. So we think we can keep that core group so that we can look at them year to year. But we think it would be nice to expand a little bit to get some different participants in as well. So we'd like to see the program expand, not too much, but a little bit. And so again, this is just a list. We propose to extend the program through 2021 to increase the number of participating vessels in the program from 3 to 6, and so that would be the 3 existing with 3 new, if there were 3 existing. We are adding a proposal to amend the application period from no later than November 30th to between January 1st to March 30th. So there's already aggregate programs for the first sub-period, so we don't really need the pilot to run during that period. There's already an aggregate going on at that period of time. So we can use that period of time to have that as the application period, and then start the pilot in the spring. And then this is feedback from the workshop. We got some complaints about the historical eligibility, and so the folks who are in it already have a good historical record, so we thought we could loosen that criteria a little bit. And so they need to have at least 1 year to give us something to compare with, but I think we had said, it's there 5 years originally. And so it might be nice, if there's an applicant that is a new participant, relatively new in the fishery, to see, what they might do under this program. So I think that's it as far as what we put out to notice.
Thank you.
And so happy to answer questions on any of the data. Just to give credit where credit's due, Rich Palauskas and John Lake generated. I was just the mouthpiece. Those guys are the ones who put together all of the data. So my thanks to them for doing a nice job with those. Also, if anyone has ideas on other analyses you want to see, if you agree to move this forward, we could add in those analyses for our final report that we generate. But in the end, I think our advice on how to approach this is there was a lot of feedback that was generated. We captured the feedback from the workshop in the notice, but there was additional comments made at the public hearing that you may wish to entertain. And so maybe a good first order decision to make for the council is whether or not you want this to proceed at all. So you say yay or nay to that, and then you'll know. If you say no, then you don't have to do anything else. If you say yes, then you can then talk through some of those other things that came up during the public hearing.
Just a question.
Yes.
Were these fish all caught in state waters?
I don't know that we looked at that, to be honest with you. It's likely that a lot of them were. In fact, I can say definitively no in the case of black sea bass. Some of those were coming from offshore.
Any questions or comments? Yes. You'd like to, yeah, go ahead, Mr. Duckworth.
What is it, somebody that owns multiple boats? And there's, because this goes to the boat, or like I'll just use myself as an example. I personally own 3 boats, I fish off the river myself. If I was to participate in this, would only one of my boats be able to do it? Like, I know I wouldn't be able to get 3 aggregate limits a week, but could I does it transfer with me, like I fish under my state license, onto this boat, to the state license, not to the boat, right? I just don't want to, you know what I mean?
If you're looking to me, Mr. Chair, I'm not getting.
Well, I'm just saying, that's how that, you know what I'm saying? Like, if a person owns multiple boats, will this aggregate program, is it to the individual or the boat?
I got it, thank you. Mr.
Yes.
Chair, so that is a good question. I think, I'm gonna look to Rich, John, thank you.
Right now we have it set up so it's a fisherman vessel combo, so you'd have to pick a boat, and that would be the vessel you could do the aggregate program on. The other boats would just be, you know, like you normally fish them, but any aggregate activity you'd have to do on that vessel license combo.
Well, I'd like to, maybe, you know, just put this out there for you guys when you think about that there's a lot of people that own like multiple boats, like they might have like a bigger lobster boat, and they might have a skiff that they fish. And since this is going to the person traditionally, it should be if they own the boat, then it should go to the, you know what I mean? It just kind of seems, we don't have a license to boats. So it's always a license to the person, you know? Pilot programs to the person, not to the boat, really.
Yes.
I think part of the problem, in particular for this program, while I don't disagree, we license individuals, not vessels here in Rhode Island. We have the requirement for the vessel monitoring system, and the point of that is so that we, you know, that's kind of that accountability aspect, and so it takes away some of our ability to have that accountability if we're not sure which vessel is participating. And so I think at least these are things that we can talk about if this program were to ever move forward more comprehensively.
Because this is just a pilot at this point.
This is just a pilot, so I think to make it tractable, we have to maintain that fisherman vessel combo for now.
Understood. Any other, do you care for any other comments or entertain a motion to get things going? Yeah.
I think I'd make the first motion that Jason suggested, that I move that the council consider, continue to extend the pilot program at least for 2 more years.
So that's that first item number 1?
Yes.
Okay, second. So there's a motion made by Chris and seconded by Dr. Mike to continue the pilot program through 2021. Is there any discussion on the council for that? Seeing no questions, all those in favor raise your right hand. So that's so approved. So we could bring back that other slide. Okay, so we have items 2, 3, and 4 that the division is recommending for the pilot program. We also had some public, yes.
Could I ask a clarifying question of Mr. Duckworth?
Sure.
So what I was curious about, because I don't know how you fish, were you suggesting that because you have 3 boats and you use them for different purposes, that you could put all 3 boats into the program and we would be able to get additional data because you're fishing for different species on different boats?
Well, yeah, because like what ends up happening is I have 3 boats. And it's just because you get so many days at sea on one boat and you have to tie it up. they only give you so many days, I can only go killing at so many days on this boat federally. But, you know, so I own 2 gill netters, I had to burn the days up, so I couldn't take part. Once I burned my days up, I had to tie that boat up and I had to use another one. But I fished my state license all year for fluke, in state water, so if you got, so let's say I participated in it, I'd really only have half a season. You know what I'm saying? I have to continue to fish the boat that doesn't have any days at sea on it. That's not your problem.
Yes, what I'm trying to figure out is.
It wouldn't be so they could capitalize on 3.
Well, that's what I was thinking.
Weekly limits.
But this is a pilot program.
Right, it's a pilot program, so wouldn't we want to encourage more data in the program to have a better analysis at the end? That's why I asked that question.
That's why we're asking for more boats to become in the program, but it has to be, because it's a pilot, it has to be very measurable. I think that's the issue. If the aggregate program is accepted, that challenge of how do you work with 2 boats or 3 boats needs to be addressed. But because it's an experiment, it's a pilot, things have to be, Yes.
A quick question for Jason. So I'm assuming this pilot is looking for data with the end goal of opening this program up to all fishermen, right? Opening it up further, I guess, with qualification.
Yeah, so the idea behind the pilot, specifically the hypothesis that we're testing is, does the aggregate change behavior and or catch rates in these different gear types? And so once we answer that question, I think we could move what you just asked to the council to recommend to us whether or not they would like to see it expanded.
So my fear with that is the way you're constraining your entrance is you're not allowing people into this study that would change their behavior. Somebody who's a latent license, who's not fishing, says, oh, I can go fish one day a week now. So I just think the way this is set up, the data you're getting is not going to encompass what's going to happen if the program is expanded. I think the small sample size is constraining your data and making it not accurate. Because once it is opened up, there is going to be incentive for people who aren't. Or say somebody like me, I'm a fixed gear fisherman, I don't catch fluke. But if an aggregate opens up, we'll actually go buy a dragger then and go out once a week and get my fluke, and that's going to result in seasons ending earlier and, quotas being used up quicker.
So your point is that there should be more boats in the pilot?
Personally, I would prefer to see us pilot the 2 licenses on 1 boat and move away from aggregate, but I just see like the data we're presenting as being constrained, and it is indicative a little bit of what's going to happen, but I think there could be problems once you open it up even more.
Yeah.
The catch rates are going to rise even more than the data is showing now, because you're only pulling from existing fish, or people who are actively fishing to meet the entrance criteria.
Thank you.
Well, it seems to me that the next 3 points up there are all interrelated to address this issue of getting more data. I hate to jump to conclusions, but maybe Jason, you could tell me, looking at those initial graphs, particularly the third one that kind of summarized everything, if I read it correctly, it showed that, more fish are being caught on less vessel trips, and so isn't that what we're hoping to achieve, or at least part of what we're hoping to achieve with aggregate limits is to catch more fish using less fuel and less labor hours? That to me seems like the benefit of an aggregate program.
Yes.
So I don't know if that's what we're trying to achieve. In particular, I think some of the folks who have not preferred aggregate programs in the past, that is exactly why. That catch rates will increase and the quota allocations will be exhausted quicker. I don't think we have a definitive answer as to what is driving that increased efficiency at this point, because as you saw, the landings data was kind of a mix, right? And so those are the things we need a little more data on to kind of tease out, yes, you're increasing catch rates for black sea bass or not.
Well, which is why we made the first proposal, because we definitely have to extend it. You can't go on 1 year's data and make a conclusion that's, you know, reasonable. But I guess based on that, Dave, I would make a motion that, a further motion, that we approve the next three items to increase the number of the vessels, to, you know, amend the application period, and to reduce the eligibility requirement.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. So motion made by Chris, seconded by Mike to approve items 2, 3, and 4. Before, there's one, Jesse.
I just want to ask Jason a question. You're saying by going from 3 to 6, it's not going to affect the overall quota? I mean, is it going to close quicker?
So we did not see that this year with the 3 boats. We think an expansion to 3 more boats we don't believe that those, if they kind of follow these patterns where there was a mix, right? Some of them did really well, and some of them did less, so it kind of evened things out in general. And so if that holds, that's what we're trying to figure out. We don't think it will. I can't remember, Pete, we had some safeguards.
I was going to say, is there a check in there somewhere that if it starts to?
I don't know if we ever adopted that. Jeff Grant, who was a former council member, asked for that very thing, and I can't remember what we did in the end, if we ended up being able to adopt it, but I can't say to you that it absolutely will not happen. I think the risk is low. It's only 3 more on top of the existing vessels, and we did not see a negative impact with the initial pilot. Nothing close to
the checks in there. I mean, I hate to see the season close too soon because of the fact that it's closing.
No, totally, and we don't want that either. I think in the end, we were having a little bit of trouble trying to, like, how do you know that it's closing early because of this route? And I can't remember what we did.
It wasn't it's not in the rule. It was something from Jeff that said if this, then it's a safeguard, a built-in safeguard. I don't know how to apply it necessarily.
I believe if the quota is to be exhausted in 2 weeks, the aggregate program would end for that period. So if it's projected we're going to end the quota, so say Fluke's going to close in 2 weeks, no more aggregate program until that period's over. The next one starts. Oh, right. That was it's a policy safeguard.
It would never be open for CBS.
In all fairness, the gentleman had one comment. Does it pertain to the motion here?
I just had one question. Now, in years past, if you had an aggregate certificate, you had the option of picking an aggregate in the summertime or in the winter period. And then, for some reason, the summer period, you weren't allowed to do that anymore. And now we have a pilot program back to doing what this aggregate choice was. There was a few small vessels that would opt to take the summertime instead of trying to go offshore in a 50-foot boat. Why was that ended, or that option taken away?
We're talking about this pilot program right now?
Right. But isn't that the same, a pilot and an aggregate? It's all an aggregate, correct?
This is just like a test, an experiment, you know?
No, this is
okay. Thank you.
Dave, I've got a comment on the pilot program, and this comes from when I was on the council. One of the things that everyone is concerned about with the aggregate program is how it affects the economics of fishing. Okay, so in other words, if the aggregate program catches more fish in a shorter period of time, it may be more efficient in terms of days at sea, but it may actually earn less money because you drive the price down and you don't have fish available to the markets at times when the market would like to have the fish. So there, I just feel like the council or someone should recommend that an economic evaluation be somehow included in this evaluation of the pilot aggregate program. Because that could be very important to the fishery overall. You want to catch fish that are going to pay well.
Point well taken. Yes?
Yeah, could I respond just briefly? Because, Rich, I think that's a great idea. You know, doing science for a living tells me that could be an easy thing to do, or it could be a difficult thing to do. I'm not really sure, but it would seem that this is just for consideration, that adding a data point that during this period of aggregate, you know, what was the plus or minus of the value of that fish? Because, you know, that whole efficiency thing and the price you get for the fish, it all blends into whether or not any individual fisherman would consider his season a success, right? So if he spent less money on fuel and less labor hours doing it, but his price dropped so much that he made less money than last year, then the pilot program tells you that, yeah, we were more efficient as far as the use of resources, but because of this economic effect, it's not good for the industry. So I think, yeah, warrants consideration for sure.
Jason, is that like a whole scope change of the study, or is that something that?
So, I think it is an excellent idea. My hesitancy has to do with I don't have economists on staff, nor do I have access to economists. And so that would require, I think an economic analysis could be done on this post hoc. I don't think we need to do anything special. We could just sort of analyze it after the fact. My hesitancy is generating grant money to be able to fund someone to do that analysis, because I don't have staff expertise to do that sort of thing.
Okay. So right now we do have a motion on the floor. It's been seconded. Is there any, and we can come back with this economic, that could be another motion if you want.
Right.
So I'd like to, there's no other comments on this. I'd like to call the motion, which is to recommend to the director to enhance in participating vessels in the program from 3 to 6 per gear category, to amend the application period no later than November 30, 2018 to between January 1 and March 30th, annually reduce the eligibility requirement for historical record of landings of flounder from 5 years, 2014, to 1 year. So all those in favor, raise your right hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. All those opposed? 1, 2, 3 opposed. Any abstentions? So the motion carries. The next item, do you care to make another motion about the economic?
Yeah, I would actually.
Okay.
So the motion would be, hearing what Jason said, to once the year is closed and the data is there, to if possible, to find, to get an economist to look at the historic data from that past fishing season to see, what the price was throughout the season.
So the motion is that the council recommend that an economic analysis be done on the aggregate program.
Yes.
Okay. Second. So is there discussion on that motion?
There's somebody in the audience who'd like to speak. We can.
Yes.
Speaking about what Bob was talking about, the fact of the matter is, the aggregate does not have to be like it is right now. It's every day 350 pounds, yeah, but that's 1,050 pounds that they can harvest on the aggregate. When they had the aggregate, it was 5 days to begin with. It could be 4 days, it could be 3 days. So economically, you can make it work out that way. What I don't understand is, we already have an aggregate program going through the winter. What are we getting out of that for information data? Why aren't we putting that to use instead of forming this? In other words, we already have something, we'll go by, the winter program. Why are we doing this?
Do you care to respond to that?
I think I will.
Thank you for your comment. Well taken. So we have a motion made and it was seconded. Do we want to go to the audience for additional information on the economic study?
Yeah, actually,
Go ahead.
I have a comment, yeah, and so, Jason, yeah, I think just a quick conversation with Amy or Hiro Uchida over at Natural Resource Economics will probably get you somebody pretty good.
Yep, no, I think that's an awesome idea. I just didn't want to promise anything, but we've worked a lot with Dr. Yoshida and Dr. Sproul as well on a number of things. So I think what we would do is, talk to them about the concept and then look for a grant to fund it. So.
Okay, so there's a motion made, it was seconded. The motion was to recommend to the director to perform an economic analysis of the research pilot aggregate program data once the program has been completed. Is there any further discussion on that motion?
I'd be willing to hear from Patrick.
Yes, Patrick, one.
Well, I mean, about the economic study, about that, I mean, most of us, I mean, I don't know too many people that just do the aggregate program for the week, target food just for the week. Most of us gill net drag, that's like, just kind of, the bycatch fishing. That's really what this was made for. I mean, I don't think you're gonna show anyone's really, with the performance-wise, I mean, a lot of guys is kind of giving you, I got gill net, so I don't have to set my, if I were to participate in this, if I was one of the people, I wouldn't even have to set my food care because I can catch it slowly during the week. You know what I'm saying? So, yes, on the fisherman's end, I would say, buy sure he's gonna make, even if he gets a lower price, every day you go out, I mean, the amount of food we get doesn't cover, barely covers our fuel, so it's really not like it'd really be, if you wanted to see, it'd be how much of the, versus the stock, the whole vessel at the end of the year,
Thanks, Patrick. Appreciate that. So, any other comments or questions? So we're going to call the motion, and again, it's to recommend an economic analysis of the pilot program as stated. All those in favor, raise your right hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All those opposed? All those abstaining? 1 abstention. Okay, so the next item on our agenda is Part 13 Cooperative Multi-State Possession and Landing Pilot Program, Summer Flounder.
Yeah, so this is a concept that has come up over the years. Starting last year, we started to work with our colleagues over in the state of Connecticut in really thinking through how this might work. And so over the past year, we developed some regulation, a regulatory package that could create a multi-state possession and landing pilot program for summer flounder between our 2 states. Since then, the state of New York has also raised interest, and I think now the state of Massachusetts is also interested in participating. And so I think we're, depending on the outcome of the meeting tonight, we'll be poised to be the first to have the regulations in place. I think Connecticut is in process as well, and I'm not as clear where Mass and New York are. So what am I talking about? This program would allow a vessel during the winter one period that has a summer flounder moratorium permit, a federal permit, because it's the winter period that fishing is occurring offshore. It would allow them to go out on a trip, and if they are licensed in Connecticut and Rhode Island, they could take both of those possession limits on that one trip. They could then come into Rhode Island, offload just their Rhode Island portion, and then go over to Stonington, most likely, and offload their Connecticut portion of their catch. So we're not talking about a program that allows them to offload their entire catch in a single state. They still have to go from state to state. What they don't have to do under this program is go in and out. So we've increased efficiency, not to the maximum, but a lot better than it was. And there's lots of safety components associated with this and all of that as well. I think it's important to note that not only were we working with our counterparts in state government, but also enforcement agencies across both states were involved in the creation of the program. And you know, there are some criteria. I won't read verbatim all of the stuff that's in there, but giving you the gist, we think it's a good idea. We'd like to. I guess my process for these sorts of things is to test them in kind of a manageable way first to see how they work, and then think about expansion after that initial test. So that's what we're trying to achieve here. And there's a bunch of criteria. The program is consistent from state to state. We're really careful with that. And communicating, in particular, Rhode Island and Connecticut have been most involved. I just found out about Massachusetts a couple of days ago. That's a change of heart for them. When Dave Pierce, who just retired, was at the helm, in no way, shape, or form are they doing that, Jason. So they've changed their mind apparently. So I'm just going to check in with them this week to make sure that their program is consistent. But from what I understand, they look to the Connecticut regs, and so it should be consistent across all 3 states. And then I'll also check in with New York to see what they're thinking as well. So we're, depending on what you all recommend, we're poised to be able to set this up and get it underway to test out in 2020.
So are there any questions? I'll entertain a motion on this particular item, the proposed new adoption of this pilot program for summer flounder. Yes.
I move that we recommend the notice rule for Part B, Part 13, corporate multi-state possession and pilot program for summer flounder.
Thank you, Chris. Is there a second? Seconded by Jason. Sorry. Any discussion? So with no discussion or questions, we'll call the Jason. Yes.
Just a comment. I mean, it's a safety issue for these guys. And I know guys that would land their fish in Stonington and then turn right around and go back out. And have to go right back out offshore where they were just fishing to get Rhode Island's limit to come home. It's just no need for any more guys to sink.
Yeah.
There's already enough guys out there.
Point well taken. So with no further comments, we'll call the motion to recommend to the director to adopt the cooperative multi-state possession and landing pilot program for summer flounder as proposed by the division. All those in favor, raise your right hand. It's unanimous. Thank you. So we have one more item on this portion of the agenda, which is the proposed adoption of the whelk pot tagging program.
Okay, so this is our last item. You may recall that we actually came to the council last year with a whelk pot tagging program. At that time, there was enough feedback that we had gotten through the public hearing process and the workshop that what we decided to do, I think the council actually actually approved a tagging program. What we decided, what we recommended to the director at that time was we felt a little uncertain about a couple aspects of it, so we went back out and sought some additional feedback, and we improved, in my estimation, we improved the program. And so just a couple of bullets here. What we're talking about is the adoption of a tagging program for whelk pots. It's going to be set up similar to the lobster trap tag program by way of the process, not any of the other aspects of allocating pots or anything like that. Please understand that. It's just the process of how you get tags, ordering tags and things like that, that is the analog to the lobster program. There will be one-time use fastenable tags. We'll issue them annually. Each fisherman will get 300 original tags. Then they'll get 10% for routine loss. And then we also have adopted a process for catastrophic loss and gear rotation as well. And so we think with those elements, we've covered a lot of the concerns that were out there with regard to whelk pots or the whelk gear, and that is that they lose a lot of gear in this fishery because of where the fishery is prosecuted and things of that nature. So we think we have enough in here to not make it onerous on the fishermen, but to allow for the fact that there is a significant amount of loss of gear in this. The tags will be purchased by the fishermen via the Division of Marine Fisheries, 14 cents a tag. The tags will be valid from September 1st through August 31st. Now, this is an important aspect of this that I'll call your attention to. This was what we originally noticed, was the September 1st through August 31st. We got good feedback, I think, both from the SAP as well as during the workshop, that that time period is not necessarily good. I think an alternate was proposed that starts April, I think. Is that right? Yes, thumbs up. So that would be something that we would need an explicit modification to what was noticed from you all if you were to adopt that, and we think that's a perfectly fine modification to make. The rule would take effect in 2020, and then there are some other aspects to it that we haven't drawn out here. So that's what we've got for you with regard to the whelk tagging program.
Great. Any questions for the division about that program?
Can you address the requirement for the federal lobster trap tags to be? So I know there's a lot of you have a federal permit that you have to have a trap tag on your trap confide, whether or not how that.
Yep. So you're just talking. Now I will, without actually turning around, look to John to help with that one.
Yeah, sure. So it was brought up at the hearing that, and it is correct that if you are an Area 2 lobster trap allocation holder and you are fishing on your Area 2 permitted vessel, any contrivance, whether it be in state waters or federal waters, that is capable of catching a lobster, which the federal government has a rule saying that whelk pots are a contrivance that can catch lobster. That's up for, you guys can talk about that, but they have that rule, and it would be more restrictive, even now, that if you are a LTA Area 2 allocation holder, you need to have a lobster tag in your whelk pot. And that's just their rule. Now, you could go out, if you are state water fisherman and you had a skiff that you hauled your whelk pots on under just your state license, did not go on the federally permitted vessel, that's a different story. You could only haul your whelk pots on that trip, but you were not on that vessel. It's the vessel that kicks in the more restrictive rule. All Area 2 federal LTAs are to the federal permit. So that's why the tag's required. Regardless of that, what you do here, that rule is in effect.
So that is where I can't get behind this rule, because what if you only have like 200 traps in your federal permit are attached to your boat? Are you restricted to 200 contracts?
Even now, you would be restricted, if you wanted to, you know, do lobster and whelk, you'd have to make a decision where you wanted to put your tags. From that vessel.
Sure.
Yeah, Al Eagles. Question for clarity. Would you be required to have federal tags in the traps if you were a federal lobster 2 permit holder and a state trap tag in those con pots? Or would the federal tags cover the law for the state?
So, yeah, that's a good question. Hadn't really thought about that one. If you're fishing that whelk pot as a lobster pot, then that's your lobster pot. You're keeping a whelk bycatch, and you know, with your federal tags, if that's what you're doing. I'm not sure.
But if you're required by the state to have state trap tags in the whelk pots, are you still required to buy the state trap tags and put them in addition to your federal trap tag?
I would say if you're putting a lobster trap tag in a whelk pot, that's identifying it as a lobster trap, and you're allowed to keep whelk from a lobster trap.
So the state EPOs would accept that as a legal conch trap in the state of Rhode Island?
I mean, it's interesting, and unless we formed language to require it in there, which I don't see it as necessary at this point. I don't see a lot of people doing that. Maybe I guess that's why I don't.
Well, there are some people with federal lobster 2 permits fishing whelk traps in state waters, and they use their federal trap tag. So I'm just wondering if they're going to be covered under the law of Rhode Island legally fishing that trap in state waters if they don't have a state trap tag in it.
I would say that it's a tag, it's a trap that's been identified and tagged. I think they would be in compliance with the rules.
Okay, thank you.
I find the 10% to be inadequate. This tagging program is ripped straight off the lobster fishery and slapped on the conch fishery, and I don't think they're the same. First of all, I'd say nearly all full-time lobstermen have an 800 trap tag allowance, so they get 80 extra tags. We only get 30. I mean, I lose 10% per season, so we separate into a spring and a fall season. Around 10% is average. I've lost over a third. So as currently construed, I'm retagging twice a year. I'm gonna have to retag after every spring and fall season to get back to 300. And I think that's a little onerous. I don't know. A lot of the fishery operates as singles. In Narragansett Bay, we have heavy boat traffic. You lose your single buoy, that pot's gone. So that and the geographic distribution of the conch fishery is very constrained. There is a little bit of fishing out front, but I think by and large it all occurs in the bay. And that bay is competed for with many other fisheries, including mobile gear. A lot of the mobile gear and conch grounds coincide, and we have a lot of gear loss due to that interaction. I think the overage should cover what we typically lose. I shouldn't be required to order 2 sets of tags a year, because I do lose more than 30 pots a season. I mean, Mount Hope Bay and the West Passage are the 2 areas where mobile gear and conch gear compete a lot, and people lose a lot of traps. I don't think it's fair that you're gonna have guys having to order 2 sets of tags every year, year over year. It just seems a little onerous to me.
Thank you.
Do you think 15% would be?
It would be better. And I know 20% is getting pretty high, so I mean, I can compromise at 15. That's better than 10.
Great. So we'll entertain a motion at this point, and it doesn't necessarily have to be exactly what's there. It can be. Okay, Mike.
Okay. I'd like to make a motion to sort of adopt the proposed rule on whelk trap tagging as written, with the proviso that the routine loss be up to 15%, and the tags are valid from April 1 to March 31st.
Okay. So we have a motion. Is there a second on that motion?
I'll second.
Second by Katie. Any discussion? The council in?
Is there, actually I do have a question.
Sure.
Is there any way to get anything written into this regulation about the federal? There's nothing you can do, right? And is the difference between, because I know Mass has trap tags for basically every individual species. How come they don't have to fall under that? Is it because they're licensed to individual species, or what? Why can they do that and we can't?
I missed so I think your first question, the answer is the federal rule is what it is. Nothing that we do in regulation would supersede that. I missed your second.
Massachusetts, they have specific whelk trap tags, just like they have sea bass and Scup. How can are they falling under the same regulations federally than we are?
Yeah.
So, and there is no problem.
It's the same whether it's Massachusetts or Rhode Island.
Any other comments or questions? Yes.
So Jason, I know the proposal originally was from September 1st. I assume that meant starting in 2020? That was the original.
Yeah, how do we have that timing?
I guess my real question is, are you going to be ready to go April 1st of 2020?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep, that's right.
We've been in contact with the company, yes, I think we'll be ready.
I gotta get moving.
We'll be ready.
Great. Okay. Yes.
So, Jason, how did you figure 14 cents per tag? That seems to be kind of an odd number.
That's what they charge.
Yeah, we just put it, I mean, it's what the company charges. That's where that comes from, and, you know, we just put it up there so people know that we're not making any revenue, it's the exact cost of the tag.
Okay.
Thank you.
So getting ready, anyone care to go to the audience for more clarifications? Okay, yes.
So going back to this whole lobster pot tagging thing, and kind of, I think there needs to be some kind of definition of a conch pot. I mean, a lobster pot's a conch pot. I don't have to put a conch tag in that. I've seen people use lobster pots as conch pots. I mean, you catch them as bycatch. And also, if you only require a lobster tag, that would be a way around the limit for people with lobster tags, I guess. I just see it getting a little sticky with enforcement when, you know, somebody calling lobster pots as conch pots, but it's only got a lobster tag. But it's all on how you use it, I guess, which is very, I guess, hard to nail down. It leads to, like, again, the enforcement agents having to make interpretive decisions instead of something backed by a regulation.
Is there a definition for what a pot? So
I can answer that. It is in the original document for the workshop. There is in the back of the document towards the end of it. There is a definition for whelk pots, lobster traps, crab traps. The state definition. It's already written.
Thank you very much. So if there's no further comments or questions, I'd like to call the motion to recommend to the director to adopt the whelk pot tagging program as proposed with amendments that the blue team loss be 50%, the tags be valid from April 1 to March 3rd. So all those in favor, raise your right hand. It's unanimous.
We'll make sure.
Oh, okay. So the last item on the agenda is an informational item, which is the division letter of support, the framework adjustment 14. And do we have a visual on that at all, or?
No, we just wanted you to know that was in your packet. You can go and read. I think it relates to one of the items we were talking about earlier in the meeting. Yep. We were just going to let you know what was in there and feel free to read it.
Okay. Is there any other business to bring before the council? We'll entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Dave, I'll just
motion made.
Give you some upcoming events.
Sure.
Just let you know that the council webpage is up and running.
Looks great.
If you go to the public meetings, you'll see about the council. Please take a look. Let me know if you got any changes there. To Mr. Hittages, we have a hearing coming up on February 10th. That's generally our recreational specs hearing. To go along with that, we'll have a workshop on finfish on January 9th, and then a separate workshop for striped bass on January 13th, and then that'll follow up with you guys coming back on March 2nd. And now we'll probably need a fourth hearing of a cycle sometime in May or June, just to catch up on a few miscellaneous items. You'll hear about that in short order.
Pete, do we have those dates anywhere else? Will you be sending them out to us, or?
I will send them out. They are confirmed with us, so I'll send you all an email so you can put them in your calendar.
Great. So motion to adjourn the meeting?
You send them over next week too?
Seconded
Yeah,
by
I'll do that. Yeah, just get them down, yeah.
Okay,
Good point.
great.
all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Great job.
Yeah.